And we are live on LinkedIn, SoulBuffalo Earth Report, episode number 8 or 9. I can't exactly remember, but I'm super excited about it because we're here with Jeff Kirschner from Litterati. How are you, my friend?
Well, Dave, yourself?
Doing really well on a Thursday in October here. Super excited to dive in. Before we start in there, I just wanted to say that I downloaded the Litterati app maybe, I don't know, a month ago. And I've heard a lot about what you're doing, but I was just like, I got to do it. And it was walking around in the woods behind my house. We got like 88 acres behind my house in upstate New York. And there's this piece of trash that's been on this like very hard to reach place that I've like caught out of the corner of my eye. And then I saw it and I had your app and I went and I had to like endeavor and cross streams and I got it. And it was my first picture that I took and it was pretty satisfying. I gotta tell you.
Welcome to the community.
So tell us more about the community and you guys have come so far. It's really, we'd love to hear about the journey to get how you've got here.
Yeah, it all started in a walk in the woods, much like yours. I was living in Oakland, California, and my kids were 4 and 2, and we were out sort of in the middle of this area, and my daughter noticed this plastic tub of cat litter lying in a creek. And she just looked at me and she was like, "Daddy, that doesn't go there." It was this innocent comment, but it was an eye-opener. I was living in the Bay Area. We're known for being environmentally progressive, but everywhere I looked, there was trash. And when she said that, it reminded me of when I was a kid. In fact, I went to camp in upstate New York. And on the morning of visiting day, the camp director would be like, "Quick, everybody go pick up 5 pieces of litter." Well, you get a couple hundred kids, each picking up 5 pieces. And within a few minutes, we had a spotless camp. And I thought, why not apply that crowdsourced model to the entire planet? And that was the inspiration for starting Litterati.
That's amazing. And we met, like 2 years ago, the first time? I think Marcus Erickson introduced us.
That's exactly who introduced us, yeah.
And I feel like between there and now, you guys have really come a long way. You just did like one of the biggest cleanup projects ever, right? In the last couple of months?
Yeah, we did. So for World Cleanup Day, which was September 19th, we, did a thing with people all over the world and ran a bunch of what we call challenges. One in particular that's worth noting is we did something called the All Together Global Cleanup with a bunch of partners, including the Alliance to End Plastic Waste. And while the final numbers haven't totally come in yet, we're well over 500,000 pieces that have been identified, mapped, and cataloged and collected. So it was a heck of a time for sure.
That's a ton of data, right? You're just like collecting data from all over the world. What exactly can you do with that data? Lots of things, I imagine.
Yeah. So the way Litterati works is, as you mentioned, iOS and Android application, you photograph a piece of litter and that photo holds all this information. So we're able to understand who picked up what, where, and when. And we use computer vision or machine learning models to identify all the objects, their materials, and their brands. And so at the end of the day, for us, it's about how do you use technology and data to actually change the system? How do you help influence policy and packaging to be more sustainable and personal responsibility? So, one of my favorite examples actually is the first, what we call story of impact that ever occurred. And it was a bunch of 5th graders who on their schoolyard picked up 1,247 pieces of litter and learned from the data that in a town called Modesto, California. Wow. And they learned that the most common type of litter were the plastic straw wrappers from their own cafeteria. And so these kids went to their principal and asked, "Why are we still buying straws?" And they stopped. And it's a great example of how, when you combine technology with data and make it simple to use for anyone to use, you can create real change. And that's on a small scale. We've got lots of examples on a much grander scale, but that was the first example that really opened my eyes to what was possible.
I just pulled up my, I don't know if you can you see? Anyway, this is my woods. This is this piece I like that I've caught out of the corner of my eyes that took quite the effort to get to. But it's interesting. We have rivers that run through the land behind our house, and it just washes stuff up in the heavy season. So every year there's something else that's there. And we live in really, pretty nice place, like not rampant with pollution, but it's also interesting because you ride down the roads and there's stuff on the side of the roads. Like people are riding down the roads and throwing stuff out the window like it's Mad Men era or something, which is insane. And I think
So I'm going to say maybe. I'm going to say maybe people are throwing stuff out the window. I mean, let's think about it this way. Other than a cigarette butt, when was the last time you saw somebody throw something down? It doesn't happen that often, right? For us, that raises the question, like, is it about people littering? Is it about the infrastructure or lack thereof? Like, is it the fact that some animal tipped over a trash can that was overflowing? I think there are a lot of contributing factors to the Starbucks cup or the Coke can that's lying on the side of the road. It could have been thrown down for sure, but
bears. There's lots and lots of bears.
Well, then it's definitely the bears.
Everywhere there's bears. In that same woods, I ran into a mother and 3 cubs not too long ago, and bears get into trash cans and rip trash bags to shreds. So I'll definitely give you that. It's interesting too. I mean, what problems that we're having here versus problems that are around the world. I mean, so tell me some stories from like what you guys have done in Southeast Asia or Africa or other places that don't have the kind of infrastructure that we have.
So I'll give you an example of something that recently happened in Holland, which does have a great infrastructure, and then we can talk about sort of places that don't. The Dutch Litterati community recently picked up about 30,000 of these plastic wrappers. They're called Antiflu. It's a brand, like a cough drop. And those wrappers were found all over the Netherlands, and they brought that data to the company. And they showed it to the CEO, who looked at it and he was like, all right, we got to make a change. And so it took 7 months, that's it, for that company, it's called Pervasco, to change the supply chain. All generated by the inspiration of this data collected by the Litterati community. And now those Antiflu little cough drops are no longer wrapped in plastic. They're all wrapped in paper. And like that's a great example of how when you give people the motivation and a tool to make a change, it can really add up to, making a big proactive positive difference going forward. We're starting to look at how we can use our data and our technology in places with a lack of infrastructure, right? Working with the informal waste picking sector so that they can identify what is still lying on the ground that upon first glance may not have immediate economic value in their eyes, but when you take a deeper look, it actually does.
Yeah, I mean, it's so complicated. Well, I think the gamification side of things is really interesting. I mean, just like totally on a very, very micro level of like, okay, now I want to take a picture of all the trash that I find out near the river by our house. Right? Yeah. Like that's definitely something that I want, but it's just I don't know why. I have it in my app, but so I feel like there's like the community competition piece of it. In the waste picking communities, waste collector communities, they're dependent on it on their livelihood. But it's also I think there's just something about this turning this into a game that makes it fun, that makes it sticky, that makes it the kind of thing you want to tell your family about when you get home at the end of the day.
It's one of those things where we believe that there's an opportunity to, frankly, capture people's hearts and minds, right? Like, I think today people feel that they're overwhelmed. Not that they feel. They are overwhelmed by today's environmental problems, right? They look at something like climate change, ocean acidification, plastic pollution, and they feel this sense of what can I possibly do to make a difference, right? How can I possibly contribute to a solution? And so that's where we're focused. How do we do something that is simple yet sophisticated so that people go from feeling overwhelmed to inspired? Let me explain a little bit more about what I mean. Let's say you pick up a bottle cap in Long Island and I pick one up in Los Angeles. Those are isolated, quiet acts. I don't know you exist, you don't know I exist. So therefore, you're left with this feeling of like, what difference would it make? I'm overwhelmed by the problem, I'm isolated, I can't contribute. But what Litterati is starting to do is bring people together. So now you and I do know one another exist. Suddenly we're connected, and that feeling of overwhelm turns into one of inspiration and empowerment.
I love like going back and like getting into the cultural side of this equation. You have that like famous scene in Mad Men where they go out for a beautiful picnic, and at the end of the day, Don Draper picks the picnic blanket up and he shakes it out and everything goes everywhere. And it's like, okay, people were obviously not conscious at all back then about this issue. And like up here where I am, which is 2 hours north of New York City, which, is in the Hudson River Valley, but it's essentially like between the Catskills and the Shawangunk Mountains. People used to just dump their trash along the riverside. So like you'll walk through areas where you'll just see lots of bottles. I mean, and there obviously wasn't as much plastic back in the 60s and 70s as there is today, but there's just like bottle. You're like, what is going on here? It's like, well, that's what they used to do with the trash at the end of the day. They used to just dump it in, locally around I remember like as a kid too, in Baltimore, where like you would hear or see like places that were just like people would just dump everything, right? So we've seen this consciousness raised, but to some degree, it's like rooted into some old cultural like unawareness, right? So it's like, I think like platforms like Litterati just really help getting consumers to understand, or not even understand, but just to be conscious of what they're doing with their stuff. I mean, so I don't know. You got any thoughts on like the history of litter?
Well, one of our community members recently said, "You guys make the invisible visible." So like it just starts with seeing it. Right? How many cigarette butts do all of us walk over every single day? Or coffee cups or potato chip bags or, plastic cups and coffee lids and sleeves. And I mean, endless, right? It's almost like we don't see it. The problem is so pervasive that we've just become desensitized. So I think that that's where it starts. Like, can you just start to notice, like the blue plastic bit that you shot, right? Like, can you just start to notice it? And then what are the steps to actually doing something about it?
Game on. We need like the consumer consciousness piece of this puzzle is without a doubt, if you want to get anyone to agree, activist industry, whatever, it's like the consumer consciousness piece of this puzzle is going to be the way that we get on the other side of it. Question for you. Can you talk a little bit about the plug and play accelerator that you guys have been a part of?
Totally. So
this is super cool.
Back in, I want to say February, Plug and Play and the Alliance to End Plastic Waste came together for a sustainability accelerator. And I think they looked at 500 companies as prospects and selected 10, of which we were honored to be one of them. And then during demo day, we were very fortunate to be awarded the best startup coming out of the class. And
other startups, like all dedicated to plastic waste, obviously, right?
All dedicated to waste in different, shapes and capacities, different shapes and capacities. Amp Robotics was one. There's some really, really interesting work going on with these other 9 companies. Some deal with gray parrots and some deal with sensors at MRFs, others deal with new materials, some deal with trash cans that have sensors that go into airports, and things like that. So on the heels of that program, the Alliance, which is made up of, dozens of member companies around the world, including Dow and Pepsi and a bunch of others.
Lots of them, 47, I think.
Yeah. And, what we did was we said, look, World Cleanup Day is coming up, September 19th. Why don't we all come together and do this massive, employee and family engagement program? And so that's what we did. And so we've been working with the Alliance to really push out this ability to capture people's hearts and minds and get more people all contributing to the same greater good. And we're just getting started.
That's amazing. Let me ask you a question, just sort of outside of what you're doing every day. If you could like bring out your inner fanboy, for lack of a better way of putting it, what person working to solve the ocean plastic crisis would you most like to meet, and why?
Who I haven't met yet?
Yeah, or you could sit down with them again if you've already met them.
Oh, there are so many people doing amazing work. You mentioned his name before, and I'm very fortunate to call him a friend and an advisor to the company. In fact, I will be on with him today. Marcus Erickson is about as impressive as they come, and his wife Anna. Say that again.
I said he's amazing. He's going to be on. He's going to be on the show in a month.
There's something very special about those two, and not only what they've built at Five Gyres, but just sort of how they see the world. I had the pleasure of bringing my family out to do a dinosaur dig with Marcus and his family in the middle of Wyoming a couple summers back, and I learned something about him that I find incredibly irresistible, to be honest. And I think this helps when solving some of the biggest problems in the world, which is he has an uncanny ability to make the complex simple. And so I think when we're talking about, who are the people who are trying to solve the plastic pollution problem and the waste problem at a global scale, we need to turn the complex into simple, digestible, tangible, measurable output. And he does that about as well as anybody I've met. People that I haven't.
Just for context, so Marcus founded Five Gyres. He apprenticed under Charlie Moore, who's the guy that discovered the Great Pacific Garbage Patch in 1997. And from there, Marcus started Five Gyres. He sailed from LA to Hawaii in a junk raft made of plastic water bottles that almost sunk a couple times. There's video on YouTube that you can look at for there. And he has written a lot of the scientific papers that have been some of the most sort of early papers around microplastics. And he led our Ocean Plastic Leadership Expedition Summit out in the Atlantic Gyre. He's run ocean plastic expeditions all over the world. Yeah, he's just a brilliant, amazing dude. And his wife, Anna, and those two are a power couple if there ever was one.
They walk the walk. They really walk the walk. In terms of two people I haven't met, Dr. Sylvia Earle has always been a real inspiration to me. I mean, the sheer longevity of her impact on the planet and the ocean is, unbelievably wonderful. And on a business side, what Mark Benioff has done has been also inspiring to me. The Benioff Ocean Institute and the work that they're doing is incredible. I think he's been a force for using business as a platform for good. And he's dedicated to a lot of the environmental problems, and certainly ocean is a big one.
He's a big supporter of Boy and Slat and the ocean cleanup, and his real early supporter of those guys and what they're doing. And then Sylvia's got her hotspots, that she's working on. The Sargasso Sea, where we spent the Ocean Plastic Leadership Summit, one of them, which would basically protect those areas from fishing all over the world, basically setting up national parks in the ocean. You picked some good ones there, Jeff. That's amazing. If you had a magic wand, what would you, or maybe a better way? Yeah, I guess you always ask what's keeping you up at night, but maybe reverse engineer that. If you had a magic wand that is attainable today, where would you focus your energy on solving this issue?
It's pretty much where we at Litterati are focused now, which is building out the machine learning models so that the minute you snap that photo, everything is instantly recognized in a way that is nearing 100% accuracy. So that's incredibly difficult given that we are photographing items that are in different states of decay and decomposition, right? But if we can really transform that photo into that simple photo into sophisticated analytics and data that can go on to help inform policy and influence packaging and inspire personal responsibility, that would be if I could snap my fingers and make that a reality, that would be the immediate. And the good news is that we're getting pretty close to that. We've got a long way to go, but we have poured a lot of time and effort into solving that challenge. The other thing that has been really eye-opening for us is that we've gotten a ton of traction with cities. And if we can continue to provide sufficient and significant value to cities to help them do the two things that they're asking for, which are, one, how do I engage my citizens? So how do I get people to be active and to care? And then two, provide them with really wonderful data about what's lying all over their streets and their sidewalks and their playgrounds and their beaches so that they can make more informed decisions. Those two ingredients, we believe, provides a recipe that can create real impact going forward.
We were talking earlier, I'm from Baltimore, and I have this soft spot in my heart for all things Baltimore at all times, and won't ever give up my 410 area code on my cell phone. But the Baltimore Trash Wheel, or these things called Mr. Trash Wheel, it's the funnest follow on Twitter. And they're basically these river systems that pick up lots of different materials. Do you feel when you think about what cities you want to work with, do you want to go into the Baltimores or the Oaklands or the Detroits or maybe the cities that don't have the best reputation right now? Or is there any kind of rhyme and reason for how you come together, with some of the city programs you're working with?
I didn't know Oakland had a bad reputation. I just lived there for 10 years. I think it's got a fantastic rep. The answer is no. I don't think we don't cherry pick cities yet. And here's why. We're right now just handling the inbound organic word of mouth interest we're getting. And so for us, if you're a prospective customer for Litterati as a city, and you're raising your hand saying, I'm interested in what you guys have to offer. I'm interested in learning more because I, the city, feel this pain and we want to solve it. That's the kind of, prospects we want to work with. Because for us to try to convince a city that they have a problem and that our solution is right for them, we don't think is the right approach. Not right now. It's really about like, who are the cities that are, open to trying something that hasn't been done before and working with us in a collaborative way to say, look, we actually can engage our citizens and can be smarter about these massive budgets that we're spending in a way that clean things up and set like the right baseline for going forward so that we're not just doing this year over year over year over year, right? It's that old definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. For us, it's about how do you get smarter about solving this problem? And we think data is really the key to that.
Yeah, it's like you think of like the break free from plastic movement, which is like thousands of organizations that I would say lean activist is probably a good way to put it. We work with a lot of organizations that are inside of that break free from plastic community, and they've been doing these brand audits where it's very tactical. It's feet on the ground, picking up trash on the beach, and they're logging each company's. If there's a label, then they're logging it, right? So, but it's very manual. Right. So it's interesting, like the applications that where your tool could be really helpful once the sort of AI component, can read these labels. And it's not scanning barcodes, right? It's just looking at the bottles and looking at the labels.
Yeah. And we can do it now with, they call them classes. So we are able to, with a reasonable above 90% accuracy, grab a number of objects, a number of materials, and a number of brands. But I'm talking about being able to do that for thousands of brands, right? Globally. Recognizing different languages and different alphabets and things like that. We've talked to the Break Free from Plastic movement and some of their leadership about using Litterati to help with the brand audits. And, I'm hopeful that we'll be able to collaborate going forward.
Yeah, you and I talk sometimes about the walking the tightrope, which I think we both have to do, right? Because we work with a lot of organizations that are like what you would call like environmental NGOs that are dedicated to shutting off single-use plastic at the tap. And then also big industry groups, some of which make plastic, and being kind of neutral in the middle can be pretty tricky at times. Just gotta for us, I mean, it's just about putting one foot in front of the other and realize there's going to be a lot of different solutions, and then trying to stay on that tightrope when there's a lot of charge and a lot of opposition.
There is a lot. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
There is a lot of charge. There is a lot of, opposing viewpoints. And you're right. Like, look, this is not easy. This is a really hard, complicated problem to solve. And I'm of the mindset that you need to look at all solutions. And I think you share that opinion. And I know that, that might not be a popular opinion all the time. And that's okay. For us, like, it's about providing transparency of what's lying on the ground or in the ocean or on beaches, right? And that comes from the data. And that means understanding what are the objects, what are the materials, what are the brands. I would consider Litterati a sort of neutral leaning activist because we're of the mindset that like the status quo isn't working. Things need to change. And so our way of trying to create change, which I would say is one of the hardest things you could possibly do, is create change, is by empowering people to collect data. That's where we're focused on.
What are some of the like, let's say 10 years from now, if we were to go into the future and your platform could be doing like what you dream it would be, like what do you think like some of the highest expression of what this data could do, when we're sitting in 2030? God, it seems like a million years away given how long this year's been, but
something tells me 2030 is going to be here before we know it.
Yeah, right.
So
in 2020, that's for sure.
Yeah. So really easy for me. So I would love and believe that Litterati can be a platform used by every city in the world, so that those cities are able to get down to the raw data, like at almost a diagnostic level, so that they understand. And maybe that data is captured by drones, satellites, people with apps. Like how that data is captured in 10 years from now, who knows? But the point is that that level of environmental intelligence is at their fingertips, so that they can identify
down to a block level, down to like this part of town needs, like, is that the application? Like down
more specific, like down to the foot.
Wow.
That level of specificity. Because that's how you start to understand patterns. That's how you start to understand not only what is there, but what's not there. So here's what I mean. We just recently built something called segments. And this is something we're using with cities, right? So a segment is like point A to point B, 100 meters long. We worked with the scientific community to come up with what have they been using for many years that makes most sense. So think about it as like your activity tracker. You walk from point A to point B. And what we do is not only do we show that on a map, but we track how long did it take you to walk from point A to point B? How many pieces did you pick up? And what were those things? Again, the objects, the materials, and the brands. What segments allow us to do is create comparable data sets. So now I can compare this block to that block, or this block to itself 6 months down the road after we've tried certain campaigns, or we've put in trash cans in strategic locations, so that we can measure the efficacy of those campaigns or how we're allocating certain resources. And when you compare a block to a block, you can start to understand, well, what is it about this block that's different about this one? Why is this one so much more littered? Is it because that there are 3 coffee shops on this block that don't exist on the first? Is it because there are 2 bus stops and they happen to be magnets for litter? Why? Because people are waiting there in the morning with their breakfast sandwich and coffee. Like, you start to get into this real diagnostic level of understanding the problem so that you can shape the solution. And that's where I think we can go. So with cities, 10 years from now, or frankly in 3, be that default platform used by every city in the world. I'd also love to be in every school. We've built an educational curriculum that any school can come now at edu.litterati.org, come be part of the program. There's a one-day lesson plans, week-long lesson plans, month-long. So those are 2 areas. We'd love for the NGOs to lean on us as a tool that they can use to help map and measure the world's waste. And then finally, for brands, to help brands understand where their material is ending up and potentially how they can get it back.
Are you working in Africa right now?
There are certain Litterati challenges, which are in the Litterati application, that are going on in Africa right now. There's one that just launched. It's called the Litterathon, and it's in Nigeria, I believe. And it was created by a young activist who came out of the Ocean Heroes Boot Camp, which is a fantastic group run by the Lonely Whale Foundation, Captain Planet, Point Break Foundation. And there's a bunch of other contributing organizations. But that's one thing that's going on in Africa. I think it's live right now.
Remind me, I definitely need to introduce you to our friend and advisor of the OPLN, Kieran Smith, who's in Nairobi, who runs Mr. Green Africa. It's like just best in class waste collector operation. Got like hundreds of people working for him, getting them healthcare. But anyway, just
awesome. Kieran Smith.
Kieran Smith. Pardon me. In a couple weeks, I'll just got to remember, connect Jeff with Kieran. It's 3:30. It's crazy. That flew. Really appreciate you coming on, Jeff, and just here on the SoulBuffalo Earth Report, Jeff Kirschner with Litterati, man, and just thanks for doing what you do. Any parting words before we sign off?
Yeah, thank you for doing what you do.
All right, well, game on. So, guys, if you have not checked out Litterati, download it on your phone. It's super cool. It is going to help you want to clean up the earth even more, I guarantee. And we just really appreciate it. Have a great day. And we're back on Tuesday of next week. And next week we have the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and the World Economic Forum. Very, very excited. So anyway, thanks so much.
Okay, have a good one.